bank closures. Let's have a chat about that, because more than 600 bank branches have closed across Britain over the past year, with rural areas worst affected. Parts of Wales, Scotland and southwest England lost the most per population between April 2015 and April 2016. 5 of the top 10 areas losing banks are in Wales. The bank said that demand for branches was falling as more people switched to banking online. Well, let's talk to Jasmine Birtles from Money Magpie, who joins me on the line now. Jasmine, hello. Thanks for your time this afternoon.
Pleasure.
So is it all about the fact that everybody's banking online? And what about those people who can't use online banking, the elderly and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think it is because the number of people using online and, of course, mobile banking has increased massively, while the use of actual high street banks has gone down across the board. But as you say, the problem really is particularly for rural areas. Here in London, we were like, closures? What closures? I mean, we have an embarrassment of banks in London, and it's not really very fair that there are fewer banks closing in metropolitan areas than out in the rural areas where they really need at least one place. You know, there's the issue with post offices as well.
But I would argue that even in the city centres, there are fewer banks than there used to be.
Oh, certainly, yes. I mean, we've had closures over the last couple of decades. You know, you hear lots of people saying about how, you know, the latest wine bar used to be a bank. It's a very big thing about wine bars and restaurants taking over from banks. But in the last couple of years, 2-3 years, I haven't noticed very many closing. And in fact, we've had a few new ones opening. I mean, the challenger banks like Metro Bank, for example, has actually opened more in the last few years, and they tend to open them in metropolitan areas. So really, it would be good, I think, for the government to take hold of this and bring some sort of order to the rural areas and say, right, you know, we must have some sort of banking centre in these areas where, as you say, you've got quite a lot of older people, you've got small businesses, and just, you know, people who would like to do some over-the-counter banking. Maybe get the banks together and say, and the post office, and say, right, you know, we need to create some sort of centre here which has a representative from, say, 3 or 4 different banks and maybe a post office.
But presumably the first thing the banks would say is, look, there's no demand and it's because of cost that we're, you know, and lack of demand that we're closing them in the first place.
Of course, yes, but there's always a way of doing it. I mean, you know, when government comes in and goes, no, seriously, you've got to do this, they'll find a way. And I think, like with a lot of things, when people get together and when businesses get together and spread costs, things are much more possible. It's when you have, you know, Barclays having their own little place and Santander having their own and HSBC having their own. They've all got to have their own tellers, they've got to have their own shop fronts, etc. But if you had them all sharing one particular area in some way, I don't quite know how it would work, but that plus maybe some sort of post office teller, then I think that should be cost effective. Another thing to do, of course, is to speak to the supermarkets, because as you know, we've got Tesco Bank, Sainsbury's Bank, which is largely run by Lloyds, and of course Marks and Spencer's, which is mostly run by it's run by HSBC. So where you've got these sort of supermarkets, they could be encouraged to have their banking arm as well, so that at least local people there would be able to go to the supermarket and the bank at the same time.
What about internet banking? I mean, I know I'm a fan. I've done it for years, and lots of people do it. But there is something lost, isn't there, in the fact that you don't have that face-to-face contact and relationship anymore?
Yes, because internet banking, like you, I love it. You know, doing your banking in your pajamas. Who wouldn't want to do that? But it works as long as things are working. It's when something goes wrong, or you've got a little bit of something complicated, you've got something you want to talk about, a loan or a mortgage or that sort of thing, that it really doesn't help to be speaking, particularly if you're speaking to somebody on the other side of the world who you suspect doesn't really understand your situation and where you live, etc. And also, there are a significant number of older people who don't like even having things posted to them. I mean, I know 1 or 2 who go into the bank to collect their statements, they go in to collect money, they do all sorts of things. They really don't trust either the postal system or certainly not the internet. And that's a significant chunk of our older population, and our older population is a significant chunk of our population. It's going to be around for a good decade or two to come, I think. So there is going to be a demand. And certainly you've got younger people living in rural areas, and they're not going to be doing all of their banking online, particularly if they have, say, a corner shop or a pub or that sort of thing, which needs actual cash to keep going.
Yes, actual coins. Martin on Twitter was saying, you mentioned London, that Nationwide has pulled out of South East London, and there are also local closures of NatWest and Barclays and HSBC. Martin, I see what you're saying, but the thing is, we are, as a city, yes, we have a lot of banks to choose from. If you're talking about a small village where there's no bank left, it's a whole different story, isn't it? You're then faced with driving, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever, to get to the nearest town. Is this a trend? I know you're sort of suggesting that the government should step in, but given that these figures are 600 banks in 12 months, this isn't a trend that's going to reverse.
Oh gosh, no, absolutely. And the more that you and I go online, and the more they bring out these mobile apps. I mean, Barclays particularly is sort of app happy, and it seems to be doing well. The more that we do that, the less reason they will see to have the high street presence. And of course, high street banks, you've got all sorts of overheads. So as they try to run their businesses like a business, they're going to look to cut wherever they can. And yeah, I think a high street presence is going to be seen as a problem at the moment. But I think that's partly a lack of creativity, actually, on the part of the banks. I think there's a lot more that they could be doing with this high street presence. They could be helping their brands, for example, by maybe taking a leaf out of Apple's book. You know what it's like going into the Apple store. It's an experience. You go into there, have courses, free lectures and whatever. There's a huge advice gap at the moment. For example, there's a huge gap in just really basic financial knowledge in this country. And I would love to see some of the banks offering free workshops for people, that may be their own people, to come in and learn how to budget.
An interesting idea, something that you actually, a reason to go in for rather than just doing a course online or what have you. Interesting idea. Thank you, Jasmine. And Jasmine Birtles there from Money Magpie.